Eh, Va a empezar de China y Taiwán y Hong Kong, va a empezar una pugna fuerte. Yo lo había escrito hace unos meses. Ahorita se va a empezar a dar. No sé si se llegue a una invasión de China y en el mar meridional, el mar chino. Y también pues con esto de Hong Kong y de Taiwán. Vamos a ver qué sucede. Pero sí va a empezar a haber más, a ver qué pasa, a ver qué sucede.
China realizó el martes ejercicios militares cerca de Taiwán. Barcos de guerra y aviones de combate se ejercitaron frente a la zona suroeste de la isla. El Ministerio de Defensa de Taiwán dijo que 11 aviones chinos entraron en su zona de defensa aérea, incluidos 2 bombarderos con capacidad nuclear. Se trata de la misma zona en la que las fuerzas aéreas taiwanesas tenían previsto realizar ejercicios ese mismo día, pero más tarde. El régimen chino reclama a la isla como propia, a pesar de que Taiwán es un país independiente de facto, con su propio ejército, gobierno elegido democráticamente y constitución. Un alto funcionario taiwanés familiarizado con el asunto dijo a Reuters que Beijing también viene realizando frecuentes operaciones de reconocimiento e interferencia electrónica. Añadió que Taiwán cree que China está tratando de captar las señales electrónicas de los aviones estadounidenses y japoneses para poder paralizarlos en una guerra. A principios de este mes, Estados Unidos aprobó una venta de armas a Taiwán valorada en unos 750 millones de dólares.
Live from the world headquarters of RT America in our nation's capital, this is the news with Rick Sanchez.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez. I want to welcome our viewers from all over the world, including those of you who are watching us on the portable TV app. I want to show you somebody right now. See that image? That is Senator John Cornyn. He is known to say things from time to time that seem, well, not thought through, maybe. For example, explaining the coronavirus, he said of the Chinese, they eat bats and snakes and dogs and things like that. Then his local newspaper pointed out to him that he is a senator from Texas, where there is an annual tradition called the Rattlesnake Roundup, where his constituents every year eat snakes. In fact, it's even televised. He should know. But now Cornyn has really stepped into it again and has once again to do with China. This one could be much more dangerous. It appears that Cornyn has accidentally given away the U.S.'s invasion plans. At least that's how China is viewing this whole thing. The Texas senator sent out a tweet trying to detail where the U.S. troops are throughout the world. And in the process, he revealed what appeared to be the shocking news that there are now 30,000 U.S. troops in Taiwan. That number, which, by the way, he got wrong, is nonetheless sending shockwaves through Beijing. The Chinese are not happy about this. Suffice it to say that they're reacting and are now sending out a threat of their own, not just to the U.S., but to Taiwan, where they warn that province by pointing out what just happened in Afghanistan. This does get quite interesting, which is why we're going to be drilling down on this for you. It gets complex. There's a lot to unravel, and we will do just that here on the News with Rick Sanchez, where we believe, by golly, it's time to do news again. All right, so these are questions we think are going to come to mind for you as you watch this newscast here. Has a U.S. senator just revealed something the Chinese were not supposed to know? China is poking the U.S. over the disaster in Afghanistan. And how are they doing it? For whom is the U.S. war in Afghanistan not a loss? That's a fascinating story. You need to stick around for that. All right, so tonight, China is taking full advantage of the situation in Afghanistan to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Not only is China wanting to point out to the entire world that we have lost the war in Afghanistan and left the country in tatters, but they're also using it as an excuse to send a message to Taiwan that goes something like this. You see what happened in Afghanistan? That could happen to you, Taiwan. That seems to be what they're saying. Here With more on this is correspondent John Huddy.
As China once again holds military drills off the coast of Taiwan, it's also warning the island about putting too much trust in America. An editorial published in the Global Times, a daily tabloid controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, warned Taiwan it could face the same fate as Afghanistan if it continued relying on the United States as an ally. The article begins by describing the U.S. troop withdrawal leading to the, quote, demise of the Afghan government in Kabul, and thus dealing a heavy blow to the credibility and reliability of the U.S. The article goes on to question if this is some kind of omen of Taiwan's future fate, and finally warns the DPP about bonding themselves to the anti-Chinese mainland chariot of the U.S. Keep in mind, this is the same paper whose editor-in-chief essentially declared war on the United States, based on a now deleted tweet from U.S. Senator John Cornyn, who mistakenly tweeted there are more than 30,000 U.S. troops in Taiwan. He was wrong. There's nowhere near that amount. But nonetheless, the Global Times editor jumped at the chance to post a provocative tweet, writing, "Someone said that John Cornyn mistook that number by using the number of previous U.S. troops stationed on Taiwan Island before China and the U.S. set up diplomatic relations. I think the senator is not confused, and he wants to test our response. My answer to him is war." Chinese officials, meantime, said China would, quote, reserve the option to retaliate against foreign interference in Taiwan, which the country claims as its own territory. China's foreign ministry spokesperson accused the U.S. of violating provisions regarding Washington's $70 billion worth of arms sales to Taiwan.
No one should underestimate the strong determination, will, and ability of the Chinese people to defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity. No matter how much weaponry the U.S. provides to Taiwan, it will never change the general trend of cross-strait relations, let alone stop the process of China's reunification.
While the Global Times may have declared war on the United States, China still hasn't. As writer Tom Dowdy explains in an op-ed posted on RT, China wants to inject self-doubt into both the U.S. public and the Taipei leadership that Washington cannot readily protect the island. It is ridiculous to compare Taiwan to the failed state of Afghanistan, but the impact on America's esteem of its failure there is real. And it was a sitting duck for the kind of psychological offensive Global Times unleashed. So, as China's war games continue off Taiwan, the psychological offensive does as well. For the News with Rick Sanchez, John Huddy.
Yeah, it seems like this thing's never going to come to an end. And here's Michael Maloof now, former Pentagon official, to take us through it a little bit more. I don't know. There's so much to unravel here. I guess we'll start with Senator Cornyn. He's a U.S. senator. Like most people who work in Congress or in the Senate, they don't know a lot, but it's still stupid for him to publish something like that, especially when the number was wrong.
Yeah, he, you know, he's trying to boast U.S. prestige and supremacy, that we're going to stand up to China. After all, China is now one of those adversarial things that we are changing our entire strategic outlook on in terms of our defense strategy. It's questionable whether we even have troops in Taiwan. I think that if we did, we would have heard about it, and China would have let us know. But I think China is sending a message. I think they're trying to demoralize. They don't have any respect and regard for the Biden administration, and we saw that when Blinken confronted the Chinese and he got put in his place.
Yeah, exactly. And Blinken is acting like a bit of a hawk, by the way. Going back to your point, though. The United States may not have troops in Taiwan,
correct,
but they certainly have created a consortium around the Pacific Rim, including everything from Malaysia to Australia to Vietnam.
And Japan.
And Japan, exactly.
And Korea.
So China has reason to feel threatened, correct?
Absolutely. Plus, we're running carrier strike forces through there in through the South and East China Sea all the time, and it's a provocation from their standpoint. And but they don't think the U.S. in the end is going to come to Taiwan's defense. And I think what China might do is do a blockade. Now, what would happen, because the United States there could be an opposite reaction. The United States could say, okay, you feel that way? We're going to show you. We're going to do a Marshall Plan effect and run that blockade. You
say Marshall Plan, I say missiles of October.
Well, not yet.
It reminds me of what we did to the Soviets back in 1961.
Yeah, well, China could blockade Taiwan to cut it off, just to put even in greater pressure and to put even more of a confrontation toward us, we could continue to supply. We could cause a lot of havoc. In other words, we would be on the precipice of another world war.
Finally, this question about China and this thing they did, interesting marketing or PR move.
No.
They actually said to Taiwan, look what just happened in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
That could be you next if you keep aligning yourself with these Yankees. Well, they didn't say Yankees, that's my word. But it seemed like bluster.
It's psychological warfare.
But effective, probably.
Well, it does send a message, because even our allies are questioning now our commitments. Korea is certainly, Japan is, and look what we did with even in our agreements, like with JCPOA with toward Iran. The United States is equivocated in every respect. It doesn't show a determination that we once had, and that's what China is playing on. But I'm thinking that if that continues on, that it could have an opposite effect.
Stay right there.
Gotcha.
Stay right there, because I don't want you to leave.
Okay.
If you can, I want you to stick around, because we're going to need you for this next topic
Sure.
that we're going to cover as well. Tonight, a caveat to the notion that we have lost the war in Afghanistan. And here's the point. Yes, as a nation and as members of our military, there's no question that Afghanistan is going to go down as a loss. There's no question. But there are those for whom this is not a loss. In fact, it's a win. It's a big win, especially when it comes to this. I think you know what we're talking about. Joining us now to explain is NRS correspondent Farron Franzak. She has some totals for us, and they're very impressive or very ugly, depends on how you're looking at it.
I was going to say, it depends upon which way you're looking at it, Rick, but every American should know right now that not only did we pay for our soldiers to go over there, we also paid for the Afghan soldiers to fight there, and we paid them more than our own soldiers.
Think about this for a minute. We paid people to fight in their own country and paid them more than what we pay our troops.
Exactly. Yeah.
Everybody just stop for a minute and take that in. Everybody at home, just stop for a minute and take that in and tell me if it makes any damn sense. Okay, we've stopped. Go ahead.
Lots to unpack here, but let's go look at the total numbers here. Director Kevin, let's throw it up there. So as far as the total cost of the war, you have $2.26 trillion. That would equal $300 million per day that we spent on this war for 20 years. Wow. Every day, $300 million. Or we could give $50,000 to each of Afghanistan's 40 million people. Now let's break down exactly what was in that spending. You'll see it all here, but the numbers that I want you to look at, Rick, $85 billion to train the Afghan army, $5 billion a year in aid for Afghanistan, and then you had the $750 million for the Afghan soldier payroll. So they're finding that it was cheaper to pay the Afghan army than actually send our soldiers there. It costs about $1 million to send a soldier there, not what they're paid, what it costs.
And of course, they fought so brilliantly, these Afghan soldiers, especially this last week.
Right, exactly. And so we look at now who got the most bang for their buck. Again, the defense contractors. So let's take a look here. This is if you bought $10,000 of stock in 2001. This is where it would be today. Lockheed Martin over $133,000. Northrop Grumman $130,000. Boeing $107,000. General Dynamics $72,000. Raytheon over $43,000. The thing that's also interesting, Rick, I want you to look at this next graphic. These are the of the top 5 defense contractors. These are their board members. Now, you don't have to read the little nitty-gritty here, but what's important to note is they're all former Secretary of Defense, former Vice Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, former Navy Chief. You also even have Jim Mattis, who was the former Secretary of Defense and former Marine Corps General. A name you will not see on there, though, is former Pentagon official Michael Maloof. But I'm sure you might have some friends or two on here, Michael. What say you?
This is called interlocking, by the way.
Yeah.
They work in the military. They also work on NBC, giving them advice. They also stand and sit on boards, and then they go in and work in the government, a la Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. Let me stop. This is fascinating, what she has just reported to us. Yeah. I mean, this is what the war maybe was all about?
To a large degree, it is. Yeah,
that's sad.
Well, and that's why you're going to continue to have crisis after crisis, because we have to continue feeding that insufferable giant that will continue to need to be fed, because the defense contractors are very clever. And they have played with our congressional people to put something that goes into every component of every weapons system in every state.
Yeah.
And so they're all they all have to adhere to that.
They're all bought.
They're bought. Yeah, of course.
Let's face it. I mean,
and it creates jobs on the one hand, but you got to continue to feed that frenzy and that machine.
And that machine gets in the way of the mission. A mission for a soldier should be, it
drives the mission,
right?
It drives the mission.
But it shouldn't.
But it is.
That's sad.
Our neoconservative friends are pushing this agenda. That's why they want to move NATO right up to the Russian Federation to create havoc. Why they're intruding into the Black Sea. Why we are now going into South and East China Sea.
That's why we don't win any wars, too, right? I mean, we didn't win in Syria. We didn't win in Iraq. We're not winning. We didn't win in Afghanistan.
No.
We didn't win in Libya.
We have to determine what is really in our national security interest and be realistic about it. We're looking at everything. Why we are still the only world police in the world. We're the only ones. Russia, China are regional.
Did you look, when you looked at these numbers, it looked to me like everything that you were describing, well, not everything, I'm overstating it. Much of what you were describing had less to do with troops and more to do with military contractors.
Absolutely. And what's also interesting is when you look at those board members, Rick, and even Michael, to your point too, a lot of those people that are now board members were the ones telling the generals, oh no, we need more, or excuse me, telling the Congress, we need more time. No, just a couple more months and then we'll secure it. And it's the question of, is that revolving door of the military to the Pentagon to the defense contractors back to the Pentagon, is there something that can be done about it? Right now, no.
Well, they've tried, but they're granting waivers. For example, Austin, there's supposed to be a 7-year waiver before any Secretary of State can become a secretary, and there's also a limit in going into a defense contractor. They waive that all the time.
So they have a rule, but they don't follow it.
There you go.
And for the most part, they're making decisions based on what's good for the company that's put them on the board or made them an official of.
Well, yeah, because the companies put pressure, given their strength. They are too big to fail.
And they're making decisions then for the bottom line of the company rather than for what's good for Americans and what's good for the American foreign policy.
Well, that's beside the point. It's for their bottom line. It is for their bottom line.
When you worked at the Pentagon, did that piss you off?
Totally. Totally.
I mean, did you guys talk about that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was into export controls. That was my thing. And constantly we were being overridden to give the Chinese the high technologies that they now have, that they're now have developed because there's like a 5 to 10 year lag. They're now using it against us, like stealth technology. We basically gave them their stealth capabilities.
Because some company in the United States did a deal with them.
Yeah, McDonnell Douglas.
That's stunning, Michael. I mean, to hear us describe exactly how this war and breaking down how this war was fought seems, I think, to anybody who's listening to us tonight, to seem just really sad.
And
it's not what we're supposed to do.
It's not going to end anytime soon either.
So it'll be another one. Does that bring us full circle? Are we going to be engaged with China and we're going to do the same kind of thing? Go into a war we really don't want to win? We just want to make a lot of money?
Well, that's why we're trying to get out of the Middle East so we can start pivoting toward China and focus on China. Yeah.
There's a great quote by Chalmers Johnson, a former CIA director, who said, "I guarantee you when war becomes profitable, you'll see more of it."
Thanks to both of you.
Sure.
And to Mr. Chalmers?
Mr. Chalmers, yes.
Thank you. When we come back, RT America travels to Joshua Tree to get a close-up glimpse of the spectacular Perseid meteor shower. Have you seen this thing? It's really crazy. Right now it looks very dark, but it's going to get good. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Hey, I want to welcome you back. I'm Rick Sanchez. We've just passed the peak of the most spectacular meteor shower this year. It was called the Perseid shower, which has been taking place for possibly thousands of years, not every year, but intermittently. This time around, it was particularly noteworthy. Here now, RT correspondent Natasha Sweet, reporting from a place in California called Joshua Tree.
getting out and away from light pollution allows the naked eye to capture beautiful glowing streaks of light in the sky. And while space offers an array of shows year-round, the Perseid meteor showers are the #1 show to see. This year's Perseid meteor showers peaking around mid-August. Right now, the dazzling balls of fire are best seen in the northern hemisphere. We traveled to Joshua Tree in Southern California to see the beautiful phenomenon up close and personal. You can see the lights in the sky just sparkling under these settings. Getting away from the city lights increases your chances of seeing these meteor showers. And darker skies provide the most ideal conditions to see Mother Nature's light show. Monday's moon had an illumination of 60%. This offers a much better showing compared to what a full moon would reveal. This year on the peak night, the moon was only 13% full around 10 p.m., which some scientists claim to be near perfect. Meteors are known as shooting stars, glowing streaks in the sky visible to us when tiny pieces of space debris burns up in the Earth's atmosphere. The showers originate from Earth entering the orbit of debris from the comet 109P Swift-Tuttle. It takes a whopping 133 years to orbit the sun. This incredible discovery was officially made back in 1862. However, some scientists say it's been observed for the past 2,000 years. Under peak circumstances, one can potentially see up to 100 meteors an hour. Joshua Tree is one of many national treasures offering incredible sky-gazing opportunities. And if you haven't had a chance to witness this anomaly for yourself, experts say you have until August 24th to see it yourself. Reporting in Joshua Tree, Natasha Sweet, RT.
I want to talk now about what's going on in the British Isles, because it is a culture that has forever been steeped in the use of alcohol. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, it's a festive atmosphere that has to do with alcohol. But here's the catch. While every year there would be something like 1.5 million alcoholics in England, this last year, because of COVID, that number went to 2.5 million people. Think about that. And deaths are up something like 20%. Joining us now is Chloe Carmichael. She's a clinical psychologist and the author of the book, Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety. She wants to take us through what happened, how we get to this situation. Doctor, it's a pleasure to have you join us. Can you try and put your finger on what it is about this particular pandemic that has caused people to suddenly find their way to the bottle?
Sure, it's actually kind of a perfect storm situation. So with the masks, I think people are feeling a decrease in social support and social connectivity. And then with churches closed, churches and synagogues, for a large part during the earlier stages, people were also cut off from the place where they would find their spiritual center and reconnect with their standards and their values. There's also, of course, the issue of boredom and just plain old escapism. And so all of these things have combined, I think, to result in a real and dramatic increase and a dangerous increase in alcohol abuse.
Sounds like you're the old adage that a devil's mind is, or pardon me, idle time is the devil's workshop. When you have too much time on your hands, you don't do constructive things. Drinking is a non-constructive thing, right?
Sure. Well, it's, as you said, it's too much time, but it's also the simultaneous removal of our social supports, right? So with social distancing and mask mandates and kids having to be home from school, all of that results in a lot more pressure on mom and dad. And then again, when we remove the churches and the synagogues and the typical health clubs, places that people normally would go to blow off steam, I'm afraid that we're setting up almost a perfect storm.
Wasn't this a perfect opportunity for people in your profession, for someone like you, to actually increase the number of people that you could help? Sure, you couldn't see them in person, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't talk to them on the phone. That doesn't mean that you couldn't talk to them through a Zoom call or a conference call or a video call. So this is probably something that governments, in this case the Brits, should have created the environment for this, but it seems to me they didn't, right?
Sure. Well, actually, my book, Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety, actually was released during the pandemic. And many people said that they did find self-help to be a really great tool for them. And as you mentioned, mental health providers there's actually a great scarcity and a lot of waiting times because of all of these increases in stressors and then removal of typical sources of support like social closeness, like churches and like health clubs, but the liquor store is open, right? So that seems to be a bit of a perfect storm for people.
Give me advice, or anybody else out there. I like to have a drink from time to time. Sometimes I have more than I probably should have had. I haven't gotten to the point where I think it's a problem, but I can understand how easily it could have become a problem, and has for a lot of people. What should they do to deal with this problem? Take them through the steps.
Sure. Yeah, well, actually, one of my most successful blogs is about mindful drinking. So what we want to do there is we want to find what we call our best number, the number of drinks that actually really makes you feel the best. When we try to think about depriving ourselves of the extra drinks that we think we want, then we're at a war with ourselves. But when we can remind ourselves that there's actually a certain number of drinks that's going to really make us feel our best, and anything beyond that will actually decrease our pleasure, that can certainly be very helpful. Now, these are tips for people that don't have, the disease of alcoholism. These are tips for people that just want to manage their drinking. But certainly, of course, if you have any concern that you're at a medical risk or you have a clinical disorder, by all means, you should absolutely see a qualified professional and get an assessment.
So let me just underscore what you just said. The most important thing you can do is create a limit, and probably know what that limit is before you start, so you have a place to stop. Right? Makes sense.
Right, but that's right, but I like to avoid the word limit if I can, because that makes people feel like they're depriving themselves. I like to think of it like a target number that gives you the maximal pleasure, right? Because then you're thinking about it that you're hitting that number because it's the right number that brings you the most pleasure, as opposed to making it feel like a limit. It's just a little bit of a psychology flip.
All right, next question. We got a minute left. Tell us, how do you know when it's a problem? How do you know, for example, when you might become or be already an alcoholic?
Sure. Well, the guidelines are changing, frequently. So I would say, if in doubt, ask a professional. But certainly, and there's no black and white, guidelines about this, but for many people, drinking in the morning would be a sign. Certainly, if you have to have a drink because you have a hangover and you find that the drink helps to cure the hangover, and that's happening often, or if you have dramatic personality changes when you drink.
That's great to hear you actually create concrete information that people can use who are going through this, and there's a whole lot of them. Thank you, Doctor. My thanks to you for joining us and sharing that information. Chloe Carmichael, Nervous Energy, harness the power of your anxiety. That's our news. Thanks so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. We'll be looking for you again right here when it's time, as we like to say, to do news again.